A veteran came home and heard a soft cry in his backyard. There, he found his old K9 dog weak and left behind. When he found out the reason, he was shocked. Before we start, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. The air felt colder than Marcus remembered. Oregon in early autumn carried a sharpness in the wind that cut through his jacket as he stepped off the bus. The driver gave him a polite nod before pulling away, leaving Marcus alone on the cracked sidewalk. His boots made soft thuds as he started the slow walk home. The small town looked like it had aged since he left. Buildings were faded, some windows boarded. But maybe it wasn't the town. Maybe it was him. His leg dragged slightly, still stiff from the injury. He carried one duffel bag and pulled a small suitcase behind him. That was all. After serving for 9 years and spending the last one recovering in military hospitals, this was what was left. The streets were quiet. Leaves fell in swirls, and the only sound was the steady tapping of a loose sign in the wind. He reached the old house just before sunset. The yard was overgrown. Weeds pushed through cracks in the walkway. Paint peeled from the siding. A loose shutter banged against the frame. It was the same house he had visited as a kid. It had belonged to his grandfather, then his parents. After they passed, it became Marcus's, though it never really felt like his. He moved to the side gate, which hung off its hinges. It gave a loud creak when he pushed it open. The backyard looked worse than the front. A broken birdbath lay on its side. The garden was buried under tall grass. In the far corner stood the old wooden shed, half collapsed. He stopped walking. Something didn't feel right. The wind dropped for a moment, and in that stillness he heard a sound. A slow, dragging scratch. It came from the direction of the shed. He stood frozen, listening. Another sound followed, a faint whimper. It was low and broken, as if coming from deep inside something that had forgotten how to speak. Marcus stepped toward the shed. The boards were rotting, the door off its track. He pulled it open with effort, and the smell hit him first. Damp wood, decay, something worse. He lifted his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness and landed on a shape in the corner. It was a dog, skin and bone, fur missing in patches. One leg bent at an odd angle. His head was down, ribs showing through the thin coat. The dog trembled, trying to lift its head. Then their eyes met. Dull, pale eyes that still held something. Recognition, pain, memory. Marcus stepped closer, light still fixed on the dog's face. Then he saw it. Collar. Old, cracked leather. A single tag hung from it, scratched and rusted. He leaned in, wiping the surface gently. A name appeared, barely visible under the grime. Ghost. The name hit him like a wave. Ghost was his K9 partner during his last deployment. The same dog that had been beside him through every mission. The dog that had pulled him out of the rubble when the explosion tore through their unit. The dog he had whispered to while bleeding out, telling him to stay. He had been told that Ghost would be cared for, that an old friend would keep him safe while Marcus recovered. But the friend had stopped answering messages. Marcus had assumed Ghost was taken elsewhere, maybe returned to the military. He never imagined this. He knelt slowly. Ghost tried to move but collapsed again. His breathing was weak. Every rib was visible. His paws twitched slightly, as if unsure whether to reach forward or give up. Marcus reached out and touched the dog's head. The reaction was small, just a slight nudge into his palm. But it was enough. He removed his jacket and wrapped it gently around Ghost's body. The dog was light, far too light. His heartbeat was shallow, and his nose was dry and cracked. Marcus lifted him carefully, holding the broken body close. The shed door swung back and hit the frame. The wind picked up again. Marcus walked back through the yard and out the gate, not stopping at the house. He turned toward the main street, where he remembered a veterinary clinic still stood. His legs ached. Ghost didn't make a sound. The jacket around him moved with each unsteady breath. The lights from the town were faint ahead. A gas station sign blinked in the distance. By the time Marcus reached the clinic, the sky was dark. His hands trembled as he pushed the door open. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of medicine and animals. A receptionist looked up, startled at first, then saw what Marcus was carrying. She didn't ask questions. She called out to someone in the back. A woman in a white coat came rushing forward. She took one look at Ghost and led Marcus straight to the back room. Machines were turned on, and Ghost was placed on a metal table. Lights were moved, gloves snapped on, and the vet started working. Marcus stood aside, watching, his hands still shaking. One of the nurses guided him to a chair. He sat, staring at Ghost's still form, hearing words he couldn't focus on. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, infection, broken leg, days, maybe hours without help. The vet asked something about payment. Marcus reached for his wallet and handed over everything. He showed his military ID. He didn't care what it cost. When the vet nodded and the door shut behind her, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His eyes burned. The world felt both too loud and too quiet. The image of Ghost in that shed replayed again and again. The collar, the name, the silent cry. He stayed in that chair for what felt like hours. The buzz of the machines became background noise. At one point he noticed blood on his shirt, not his own. He didn't wipe it away. All he could do was wait, for a sign, for movement, for the next step. The night passed slowly inside the clinic. The walls were pale, the lights soft, but nothing felt calm. Marcus sat in the corner of the small waiting room, his hands resting on his knees, his body still. Only his eyes moved, watching the closed door that led to the exam room. No one had come out yet. Ghost was still inside. He tried not to imagine the worst, but the thought kept returning. The dog had been more than a partner. He had been the one constant in all the chaos of war. Now he was fighting to live again. But this time there were no bullets, no explosions. Just silence, hunger, and time that had moved too fast. The door finally opened. The vet stepped out. Her face was tired but calm. She spoke in a low voice. Ghost had made it through the night. He was still weak, still in danger, but he had responded to fluids and medication. The leg would need surgery later. The infections were serious. It was not over, but there was hope. Marcus nodded. That word stayed with him. Hope. It wasn't something he used often. He had learned not to expect too much. But now, sitting there in that small room with the smell of antiseptic in the air, he allowed himself to believe just a little. The vet led him to the recovery area. Ghost lay on a thick mat, a blanket covering his body, and 4-line ran from his leg to a nearby stand. His eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling slowly. Marcus stepped closer, kneeling beside him. He reached out and placed a hand gently on the dog's head. For a moment he didn't speak or move, just sat there, breathing the same air, waiting for something to change. Then Ghost opened one eye halfway. It was unfocused but calm. That was enough. Marcus stayed for hours. When the vet offered a chair, he refused. When she said he could come back later, he shook his head. He wasn't leaving again. The chair stayed empty. He rested beside Ghost on the cold tile floor. As the hours passed, his thoughts drifted back. He remembered the first day he met Ghost. It had been during his K9 handler training. The dog was young but already alert. Ears up, eyes sharp. They bonded quickly. Marcus had worked with other dogs, but Ghost was different. He followed without hesitation, waited for signals without needing them spoken. They were a team almost from the start. Their first mission had been simple, routine patrol, quiet village. But it didn't stay quiet. A roadside blast had changed everything. Marcus was thrown back, his leg broken. The world spun. Ghost had stayed. He didn't run. He didn't leave. He stayed by Marcus's side until help came. He had pulled Marcus out of the worst moments more than once. And now, somehow, Marcus had let Ghost end up alone. That fact burned more than any memory from overseas. He closed his eyes and leaned against the wall. He didn't sleep, but he rested. When morning came, the vet returned with good news. Ghost had made it through another night. He would need constant care, close attention, steady feeding. Marcus agreed to all of it. He didn't ask questions. He would do what was needed. Later that afternoon, they allowed Marcus to bring Ghost home. The dog was too weak to walk, so they lifted him onto a stretcher and helped place him gently in the back of Marcus's truck. He had cleaned the bed of the truck that morning, laid down towels and blankets, and placed a water bowl beside a soft pillow. Ghost barely moved but gave a quiet exhale when Marcus sat beside him. The drive home was quiet. The radio stayed off. Marcus kept his hand resting on Ghost's side, feeling each breath. When they arrived, he parked close to the front steps. He carried Ghost inside, moving slowly, careful not to jostle him. He had spent the night before preparing. The living room was cleared out. A thick pad of folded blankets covered the center of the floor. Bowls for water and food sat nearby. A small lamp cast a warm glow. The house, once cold and forgotten, now felt lived in again, even if only by two. Marcus set Ghost down gently, adjusted the blankets, then sat beside him. He placed the water bowl within reach, though Ghost didn't move to touch it. Marcus placed his hand on the dog's back and waited. The first meal came a few hours later. Plain broth with soft rice and chicken. Marcus lifted a spoon and held it close. Ghost turned his head away at first, but Marcus waited. After a few minutes, Ghost opened his mouth and accepted a small amount. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That night, Marcus didn't sleep in the bedroom. He stayed on the floor, one arm resting across Ghost's back, listening to the steady, quiet breaths. Outside, the wind blew through the trees. Leaves tapped against the windows. Inside, all was still. The next morning, the routine began. Marcus set his alarm every 4 hours for feedings. He noted Ghost's temperature, checked the 4, recorded how much food and water was taken. It reminded him of field work. Timed actions, careful notes, steady hands. But this time, it wasn't for a mission. It was for a friend. Each small change felt big. Tail twitch, a shift in breathing, a slight lift of the head. Marcus marked each moment in a notebook. He tracked them like wins. In between feedings, he read quietly or just sat, sometimes speaking softly. Not full sentences, just thoughts, feelings, pieces of days. When night came again, he wrapped himself in a blanket next to Ghost and watched the shadows on the ceiling. His body ached, but he didn't care. His mind was full of Ghost's past strength and current weakness. The balance between memory and now. He knew recovery would not be fast. It would not be easy, but it had begun. And that was enough. The days settled into a rhythm. Marcus kept the house quiet. He moved slowly, deliberately. Every morning, he prepared Ghost's food first. The same soft mix of rice, chicken, and broth. He fed him by hand, waited between bites, cleaned the corners of his mouth with a cloth. Then he filled the water bowl and gently wiped Ghost's eyes. The blanket on the floor was always fresh. Marcus changed it every evening, folding it neatly and placing Ghost on top with care. He adjusted the lamp beside them to keep the light soft. He turned on low music to block out sudden noises. It was always the same old instrumental playlist he had used years ago to calm Ghost before missions. The sounds were familiar, soothing. In between feedings and care, Marcus cleaned the house. He swept the floors, wiped the windows, threw out what was broken and broken down. The living room started to feel warmer, lived in. The kitchen smelled like food again. It reminded Marcus of a life he hadn't thought about in years. One morning, Marcus heard the scrape of paws against the blanket. He looked down and saw Ghost trying to shift his weight. His front legs pushed forward, his nose nudging the edge of the food bowl. Marcus helped steady him, slid the bowl closer. Ghost lapped at the water on his own for the first time. A small thing, but Marcus watched like it was a miracle. Each day brought some small progress. Ghost's breathing grew stronger. His fur stopped falling out. The sores on his legs began to heal. Marcus kept track of everything in the same notebook he once used for field reports. Only now the entries were about food amounts, temperature checks, and tail movements. He hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks. The vet called once every few days to check in. Otherwise, the world outside stayed quiet. Marcus didn't mind. He had never liked noise. Most of his life had been spent avoiding it. Now silence was part of the healing. For both of them, One afternoon, a letter arrived. It had no return address. The envelope was plain. Marcus opened it slowly. Inside was a folded document from the Department of Defense. It was short and to the point. Ghost, it stated, had not been formally discharged. He was still technically government property. The letter advised that an agent would be in touch to arrange transport. Marcus sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The letter rested beside his coffee. His hands stayed still, but his jaw tightened. The idea of someone taking Ghost away now was unbearable. Felt like betrayal. Again. After everything they had been through. After the shed. After the waiting. After the fight to keep him alive. He placed the letter in a drawer and returned to the living room. Ghost lay asleep, chest rising and falling steadily. Marcus knelt beside him and rested a hand on his side. There was no way he was giving him back. That night he went online. It had been years since he used social media, but he found an old account. A few photos still remained, training days, a blurry shot of Ghost in uniform, a group picture of their unit. Marcus uploaded a new photo. Ghost sleeping on the blanket. A patch of shaved fur where the four had been, but eyes calm. He added a short note about finding him, about his condition, about the fight to keep him. He didn't expect much. Just needed the words out. A few hours later, the comments started. Other veterans. Dog handlers. Families. People from places Marcus didn't recognize. They thanked him. They offered help. Some shared their own photos of dogs. Some lost. Some still with them. By the next morning, the post had been shared hundreds of times. A local paper reached out. Then a national animal rescue group. A lawyer from a veterans legal defense team sent a message. He offered support. Said Marcus didn't have to give up anything. Still, Marcus said nothing to Ghost. He kept the routine. Feedings. Baths. Soft words. But inside, something new had started. He wasn't alone. People were watching now. Listening. Caring. A few nights later, Marcus woke with a start. He had fallen asleep on the floor again. A strange noise came from the hallway. At first, he thought he imagined it. Then he heard it again. A soft scrape. He looked toward the blanket and saw Ghost wasn't there. His heart jumped. He stood quickly and turned on the hallway light. There, not far from the living room, Ghost had moved. His front legs pulled him forward. His back legs dragged behind. He looked up at Marcus, tongue out slightly, chest rising fast. His tail moved once. Marcus knelt beside him and wrapped his arms around the dog's body. He was heavier now, stronger. The muscle was coming back. The fur was thicker. Marcus lifted him gently and carried him back to the blanket. That moment stayed in Marcus's mind long after the night passed. Ghost hadn't just moved. He had tried to explore, to leave the corner, to live. And Marcus knew then that things were changing. They weren't finished healing. Not yet. But they had started something neither of them had done in a long time. They had started hoping. The morning light came through the windows soft and pale. Marcus stood in the kitchen, stirring a pan of warm broth. Ghost lay nearby, resting on his blanket. The windows were open slightly, letting in the cool breeze. Birds chirped outside, and for a moment, the house felt like it used to when his mother was alive. Peaceful. Full of small, quiet things. Marcus turned off the stove and poured the broth into a bowl. He carried it to Ghost and set it down slowly. Ghost didn't move at first, still half asleep. But when the scent reached him, he lifted his head. Just a little. Enough to show that he noticed. Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor and waited. After a few minutes, Ghost shifted. Took effort, but he dragged himself closer. His legs trembled, but he leaned forward and began to drink. Not much, but enough. Marcus smiled quietly. Every small act felt like progress. The doorbell rang later that afternoon. Marcus wasn't expecting anyone. He opened the door cautiously. A man in a dark coat stood on the porch. He held a file in one hand and a badge in the other. He said he was from the Department of Defense, here about the dog. Marcus listened without a word. The man said Ghost needed to be returned. That he was part of a classified unit and had never been officially released. Marcus said nothing. He didn't nod. didn't move, just stood there, blocking the door. The man handed over a second letter. It gave Marcus 7 days to comply. Then he turned and left. Marcus closed the door slowly. He leaned his back against it and stayed there for a long time. The paper in his hand crumpled slightly. His jaw stayed tight. That evening, he opened his laptop again. He uploaded a video, just a short one. It showed Ghost dragging himself to the water bowl, then resting his head in Marcus's lap. He spoke in a quiet voice, explaining the situation. That Ghost had been found abandoned. That he had been left to die. That no one came for him until now that he was healing. He didn't ask for anything, just told the truth. By the next morning, the video had gone far beyond what Marcus expected. Thousands of shares. News outlets picked it up. People commented from around the world. Some sent money. Others offered legal support. A few even offered to adopt Ghost, not knowing that Marcus would never let him go. One comment stuck with him. It was from a woman who had lost her son overseas. She wrote that Ghost reminded her of him. Quiet, strong, still fighting even after everything. She thanked Marcus for giving the dog a chance. Later that day, the lawyer who had messaged before called again. He said things were moving, that public pressure might stop the order. Marcus didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on Ghost, who was sleeping peacefully nearby. The lawyer promised to call back with updates. That night, something else happened. It started with a sound outside. Soft at first, then louder. A click, a shuffle. Marcus stood from the couch and moved toward the door. Ghost's ears twitched. His body tensed. Marcus opened the door quietly and stepped out onto the porch. Nothing seemed out of place. The street was empty. The trees swayed in the wind. But then he saw it. The side gate was open. He had closed it earlier. A shape moved near the shed. Marcus called out once, low and firm. No answer. Then a figure stepped into the yard. Hooded, carrying something. A crowbar. Marcus froze for a second, then stepped back into the house, locking the door. He moved quickly to Ghost and placed a hand on his head. The dog stirred, eyes opening. Outside, a window shattered. Marcus grabbed the old baseball bat from beside the door. It was the only thing within reach. He stood still, waiting, heart pounding. Then Ghost moved. He didn't wait for a signal. He pulled himself up with shaky legs, paws sliding on the floor. He limped forward, each step unsure but determined. Marcus tried to stop him, but Ghost kept going, low to the ground, ears up, teeth just slightly exposed. The back door shook once. Then again. Then it opened. The intruder stepped inside and froze. Ghost stood between him and Marcus. His body trembled, but his stance was firm. His eyes were focused. The man took one step forward. Ghost growled. It wasn't loud, but it was deep and clear. The man turned and ran. Marcus stood there, unable to move. Ghost collapsed a second later, his breathing heavy, legs folded under him. Marcus rushed to him, checked his side, his legs, his head. He was shaken but not hurt. The police came 20 minutes later. A neighbor had heard the glass break and called. Marcus gave a report. Officers walked through the yard, asked questions. One of them saw Ghost and stopped. He knelt down and looked into the dog's eyes. Then he looked at Marcus and nodded. The next morning, the story appeared in the news. A veteran, a military dog, an attempted break-in stopped by a wounded animal who still stood guard. Everything changed after that. News vans showed up. Reporters called. A national morning show requested an interview. Marcus said no to most of them, but the story had already gone out. People began calling Ghost a hero, not just for stopping the break-in but for surviving, for staying loyal, for never giving up. The Department of Defense sent another letter. This one was different. It said the matter had been reviewed. Ghost would remain with Marcus. No further action would be taken. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, reading the letter in silence. The light from the window landed on the paper. Ghost lay nearby, sleeping on his side, his breathing soft and steady. It was over. No one was coming to take him now. The days that followed felt different. The air seemed lighter. The house no longer felt like a shelter, it felt like home. Ghost moved with more confidence now. His steps were still slow, sometimes uneven, but he walked. Marcus watched every step with quiet attention, always ready to help, but giving Ghost space to try on his own. Morning routines stayed the same. Warm meals, clean blankets, soft music. But something inside Marcus had shifted. The tension in his shoulders had eased. His sleep, while still broken, no longer ended in panic. Each night, he laid down beside Ghost without fear that it would be the last time. One evening, while folding towels near the window, Marcus noticed a package on the porch. No return address. Inside was a single invitation. A national veterans organization was hosting an event in Washington, D.C. They wanted to honor Ghost. The note explained that Ghost had been nominated for a National Service Animal Award. It didn't mention his condition or the viral video. It simply said he had shown extraordinary bravery and loyalty. At first, Marcus wasn't sure. The trip was long. The attention would be overwhelming. Ghost wasn't fully recovered. But something about the moment felt important. Not for publicity, not for praise, but for recognition, for all that had been endured, for what still remained. He packed carefully. A soft bed for Ghost. Blankets, medications, water, food. A small crate modified so Ghost could lie down comfortably. The drive took 2 days. Marcus stopped often. They stayed in quiet motels. Ghost handled the trip better than expected. The event was held in a large auditorium. Rows of chairs, bright lights, cameras, people in suits, others in uniform, families, veterans, service dogs of all kinds. Marcus kept to the side, away from the crowd. Ghost rested quietly beside him, alert but calm. When their names were called, Marcus walked slowly toward the stage. Ghost moved beside him, one paw at a time. His gait was uneven, but he held his head high. The room grew quiet as they approached. Not out of silence, but respect. A man at the podium spoke about service, sacrifice, and loyalty. He described how Ghost had saved lives overseas and at home. How he had waited in silence for someone to return. How he had faced hunger, pain, and fear, but never lost the will to survive. How he had stood once more to protect. When Marcus stepped forward, he didn't prepare a speech. He just spoke. He said that Ghost had once pulled him from rubble. That he had waited a year without understanding why. That when Marcus found him, he should have been dead. But he wasn't. He said the dog lying at his feet had taught him more about healing than any hospital ever could. That Ghost didn't just survive. He brought Marcus back with him. The room stayed still. Then came the applause. Afterward, people came to shake hands. Some cried. Others simply nodded. Ghost was presented with a medal. It was simple. A silver star on a ribbon, engraved with a single word: loyalty. Marcus clipped it to the front of Ghost's vest. The dog didn't react much, just leaned gently against Marcus's leg and closed his eyes. They returned home 2 days later. The house welcomed them like it had missed them. Marcus opened the windows. The afternoon breeze carried the smell of pine and dust. He set Ghost's bed beside the porch door and opened it wide. They spent the rest of the day outside. Marcus sat on the steps, elbows resting on his knees, a cup of tea in one hand. Ghost lay beside him, stretched out, his body warmed by the sun. A bird landed on the fence, then flew away. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed. Marcus looked over at Ghost. The dog's eyes were half closed, his breathing calm. His chest rose and fell with ease. A faint scar still ran across his shoulder. His back leg was stiff, but he was alive. Marcus reached out and placed a hand on Ghost's head. The dog didn't move, just stayed there still and steady. The sun dipped lower. Shadows grew longer across the grass. Marcus leaned back, letting the last light of the day fall across his face. He wasn't sure what came next. He didn't need to know. For now, this was enough. A house no longer empty. A man no longer lost. A dog no longer forgotten. 2 lives, broken and rebuilt, sitting side by side in the fading light. If you loved this story, like the video,